Have you ever noticed how the people with two good jobs often sound the most trapped? Not the flashy kind of trapped, more like the quiet kind. The kind where you're doing everything right. Your calendar is full, your income is high, and you still check your bank app before you say yes to dinner. A couple in their early 30s in a modern kitchen, both in work clothes, one scrolling bills on a phone. Here's the uncomfortable question. If two incomes are supposed to make life easier, why do so many dual-income households feel more fragile than ever? Let me introduce you to a couple I'll call Sarah and Mark. They're not irresponsible, they're not reckless, they're not living like celebrities. Sarah works in marketing for a healthcare company, Mark is an engineer. Together, they bring in a bit over $170,000 a year in the US version of this story. Or imagine the European version, two professionals in places like Amsterdam, Munich, Dublin, or London, where the salaries look decent on paper and the cost of living quietly eats them alive. They're in that bracket people point to and say they're fine. But here's the reality. They have less than 2 months of savings, they're tense around any surprise expense, and they've had at least 1 month where the credit card balance didn't fully get paid. Their life feels like a treadmill. Both working, both exhausted, both needed every single month just to keep the household standing. That contradiction messes with your head. Because if they're struggling, what does that mean for everyone else? I'm not saying this as a motivational speaker or a just budget harder person. I write about money for people who live in the real world. With rent or mortgages, student loans, childcare decisions, aging parents, taxes, and jobs that can be secure until they suddenly aren't. And after watching enough middle-class budgets, especially dual-income budgets, you start seeing a pattern that isn't about willpower. It's about structure. It's about what the modern economy quietly demands from a household and what it quietly removes in return. Most of us were sold a simple story. Go to school. Get a decent job. Find a partner who also has a decent job. Buy a home. Then you're safe. In that story, two incomes equal stability. Like a redundancy system, like having a backup engine on a plane. One person loses their job, no problem, there's still another paycheck. That's the myth. And it made sense in a world where one income could still carry the basics. But here's the bait and switch. For a lot of modern households, the second income didn't become extra safety. It became the price of entry. The second salary didn't go into savings or investing or freedom. It got absorbed into housing, childcare, healthcare, transport, and the hidden tax of modern life, having no time. And that's why Elizabeth Warren coined the phrase, the two-income trap. Her research showed that dual-income families, despite earning more, can actually be more vulnerable to bankruptcy than single-income households. Not because dual-income couples are irresponsible, but because the system quietly trains them to build a life that requires both incomes at all times. So instead of redundancy, you get dependency. And dependency is the opposite of security. Picture a typical single-income household in the 1970s. Not a perfect golden era, just a different math. One income often covered the base layer. Housing, food, basic healthcare, maybe a car, maybe some savings. The second income, if it existed, was often truly optional. It could be used to accelerate goals, or it could disappear temporarily without the entire household collapsing. Now compare that to today. In many US cities and many European capitals, the base layer has become so expensive that two incomes aren't a bonus. They're the minimum viable plan. Housing costs climbed, healthcare costs climbed, education costs climbed, childcare costs climbed. Wages did rise, but not at the same speed as the big-ticket essentials. So the second income didn't create a bigger cushion. It got converted into a bigger commitment. Let's do a simple version of Sarah and Mark's math. They earn $170,000 gross combined, sounds strong. But after federal state taxes, payroll taxes, and benefits, maybe they bring home roughly $10,000 a month, give or take, depending on location. Now the modern fixed cost stack. They buy a normal home for their area because rent is also high and they want stability. Their mortgage, property taxes, insurance, call it $4,000 a month. Two car payments or one car plus a lease, insurance, fuel $1,200. Student loans $600. Utilities, phones, internet $400. Groceries $1,000. Already we're at $7,200 and we haven't added childcare, medical costs, or anything fun. Now comes the part people don't want to say out loud. Childcare in many places isn't a luxury, it's what makes the second income possible. Daycare for one child can easily be $1,500 to $2,500 a month in the US. In parts of Europe it can be less, but waitlists, part-time coverage, and extra costs still add up, and in expensive cities it's still painful. Let's say they pay $2,000. Now we're at $9,200. That leaves $800 for clothes, gifts, repairs, medical copays, haircuts, subscriptions, kids stuff, travel to see family, replacing a laptop, and the why are we always ordering food spending that happens when two people are exhausted. So what happens when the car needs brakes or someone needs a dental procedure or the roof leaks? It doesn't feel like a small bump. It feels like a threat. And this is the key point. They don't feel poor because they lack income, they feel poor because they lack margin. Now zoom in on the second income itself. Imagine one partner earns $50,000. After taxes, that might be closer to $35,000, $38,000 net, depending on country and benefits. Then subtract the costs that exist because that job exists. Commuting and parking or transit, maybe $3,000, $5,000 a year. Work, clothes, lunches, convenience spending, another $2,000, $4,000. And childcare, that scales with two working adults, often $15,000, $25,000 a year per child in the US or significant costs elsewhere. By the time you're done, that extra $50,000 can quietly become almost nothing. In some households, it becomes negative. Not because the job is bad, but because the second income is being used to buy access to a lifestyle designed around two incomes. This is the part that makes it a trap instead of a choice. Once a household commits to fixed costs sized for two incomes, a bigger mortgage, two financed cars, a neighborhood chosen for schools, childcare contracts, the option for one person to step back disappears. And modern life doesn't even require a crisis to expose the problem. It could be a burnout year, a pregnancy complication, a parent needing care, a layoff in a stable industry, a child who needs more support than expected. In the old model, losing one income was painful, but the household might still function. In the new model, losing one income can create a sudden, immediate failure. This is why so many people who look successful feel chronically anxious. Because deep down they know, we don't have two incomes, we have one income twice. Both are already spent. And there's another layer, one that's systemic. When two incomes became common, they didn't just raise household purchasing power. They changed what families could bid. So home prices rose to meet the new ceiling. In many places, good schools are effectively purchased through housing. You're not just buying a home, you're buying a school district. So you get a silent bidding war where families stretch further and further, not for luxury, but for what feels like a basic opportunity. That's not an individual budgeting failure. That's an economic structure doing what it does. And it helps explain why research and surveys repeatedly find widespread fragility. For example, in the US, the Federal Reserve has consistently reported that a large share of adults would struggle to cover even a few $100 emergency without borrowing or selling something. That includes plenty of people with decent incomes. Because income doesn't protect you if your life is built without slack. So what do you do with this without turning it into a guilt spiral? You reframe the goal. The goal isn't maximize household income. The goal is to maximize household resilience. One of the cleanest ways to think about that is what I call a one-income foundation. Not because one income is morally better. Not because everyone can do it immediately. but because it forces a powerful question. Could our household survive without panic on one income for a period of time? If the answer is no, the problem isn't that you need a higher salary. The problem is that your fixed costs are calibrated to perfection. And perfection is fragile. When people build toward a one-income foundation over time, something changes psychologically. The second income stops being required oxygen. It becomes a tool. It can go into an emergency fund that actually covers real life. It can erase high-interest debt so your money stops leaking. It can build investments that buy future flexibility. It can give one partner the option to step back, retrain, relocate, or say no to a job that's grinding them down. And yes, this usually requires a trade-off. Not a dramatic one, not a performative one, but a quiet one. A slightly smaller home than the bank says you qualify for. One car instead of two. A slower upgrade cycle. Lower monthly commitments. Not because you should live like a monk, but because every fixed monthly payment is a vote for what your future is allowed to be. A life that looks impressive but requires two incomes forever isn't stable. It's just a well-decorated treadmill. Here's the takeaway I want to leave you with. True wealth is flexibility. Not the appearance of being fine, not the lifestyle that photographs well. Two incomes aren't automatically better if both are already spent. In fact, the biggest financial upgrade many households can make isn't earning more. It's reclaiming margin. Because margin is what turns a crisis into an inconvenience. Vote calm direct. If this made you look at financial success a little differently, you'll probably like what we do here, so feel free to subscribe.